Now we have the keynote panel discussion on bus and passenger transport. Um, to shed more light on what is the road ahead, I would like to invite bus industry leaders on our virtual stage. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Nishant Arya, Vice Chairman and MD at JBM Auto, Mr. Amit Gupta, co-founder at GoGo Bus, Mr. Prasanna Patwardhan, Chairman and MD at the Prasanna Group, Dr. Ramamurthy Krishnamurthy, who was most recently the Chief Engineer at KSRTC and is the subject matter ITS RAS at Ministry of Road Transport and Highway, Mr. Sumit Mittal, Chief Financial Officer at Greencell Mobility, Mr. Mohit Dubey, who is co-founder and CEO at Chalo, and our moderator for this keynote session will be Mr. Shamsher Dewan, who delivered the presentation earlier, and is the Vice President and Group Head, Corporate Ratings at ICRA. So, Shamsher, over to you to take it forward.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone, and very warm welcome to all of you for this conference. And thank you, Rohit, for scheduling the same. As we saw in the presentation today in the morning and subsequently by Mr. Prasanna, there have been significant changes which are proposed in the overall, commercial vehicle segment, and certainly electrification is, one of them. While we'll talk about that, but let me start the forum discussion by getting some insights from the panel members on the impact of COVID, especially on the bus segment in India, and how it is recovering from that. Now, if you look at the overall bus segment in India, typically we sell close to about 85 to 90,000 buses a year. And thanks to COVID, actually all the segments, whether it is schools and colleges, the SRTU segment, the staff carrier segment, and even the tourism segment, they were all badly impacted this year. But now with COVID infections easing, we are seeing some traction coming back into the segment. How long will it take for it to go back to normalcy is something which is on everybody's mind. So if I can maybe start with Mr. Patwardhan, your comments, since you're looking at this segment on a day-to-day basis, especially in terms of the demand. Could you share your views as to how the recovery is panning out, and where do we stand vis-a-vis pre-COVID levels in terms of public transport?
Yeah, thank you, Shamsher. So I believe that COVID has affected us in more ways than one. And it is not only transport industry, but the entire sector is affected. And that's why today I see a little movement in the market. After first wave, actually it was bounced back quite fast. But after second wave, that bouncing back has not happened really very fast. So it is a slow process. We are growing month on month, starting from July onwards, but growth has been very, very slow. Yet schools are closed, IT companies are working from home. So demand which we expected is not coming back, which came back faster last time. So that is the situation. So in people's mind today, things are changing and people want to remain safe, or I would say away from other co-passengers. That's why more and more people are preferring to use either their own cars or taxis or smaller vehicles. And that's why bus segment is hit the most. If at all, if we have other questions, or otherwise I can give my opinion on the situation on this. Otherwise, we can move to other panelists if at all, if you have other questions, or I can give my opinion on what is going to happen. So how is it works? How does it work?
Yeah, sure, sir. Let me also seek inputs from other panel members on this, and I'll come back to you on how you're looking at other aspects of the bus industry. Now, so what you've suggested is quite contrary to what we are seeing in many other sectors, like especially if I draw a parallel to the air passenger traffic, that seems to have recovered actually quite well, post the second wave. And similar trends are being witnessed in the hospitality and the tourism sector as well. But very interesting thoughts from you. So let me bounce this question to Mr. Arya. Good morning, Mr. Arya. Sir, just to share with you, I mean, we've seen that the bus segment has been hit the hardest thanks to COVID. From close to about 90,000 unit sales annually, we came down to about 25,000 unit sales last year. Certainly, this year we are going to do much better. But in your opinion, how long will it take for the segment to come back to normalcy?
So I think that's a very pertinent question, Shamsher, which you have raised, because, and this is at a very opportune time that we're discussing this, because as we speak, the sector is slowly bouncing back. As Prasanna also mentioned, month by month, there is a good improvement, and more vehicles are coming on road. The benefit which the bus segment will have now, that there's a lot of pent up demand, whether we see from schools, we see for staff buses, we see for STUs, we see for tarmac buses, all different kind of applications. And if we look at the pent up demand and the new requirements in different states, many smart cities, many different municipal corporations, many states have come out with their EV policies, where they are really focusing on public transportation in a big way. I think that will be a big booster, and this will be the right time for that to happen. But coming back to your point of when it will come back to 90,000, I see that FY end of FY23 at annualized level, or beginning of FY24 is when we should be looking at the annualized volume of 90,000. At the same time, what is essential is that today in buses, I have a different view that definitely people are using personal vehicles, but not everybody is able to use personal vehicles in all scenarios. So in buses also, the social distancing is being followed in certain cases to the maximum extent possible, and therefore that is enhancing the need of buses for the STUs furthermore, because the per bus capacity of passengers is actually going down wherever they are able to keep the social distancing intact, and they need more number of buses even to serve the same number of passengers. So I think that is something critical which has to be taken into account, and more customers wherever they can are looking at sustainable mobility solutions, whether through CNG or through electric buses, because that is not only helping with respect to CNG, but also the operating cost, which has gone significantly higher in case of diesel. And today in this scenario, it gives a very high level of comfort to the customer that their operating cost is much lower in case of electric vehicles and CNG vehicles vis-a-vis diesel vehicles. And at the same time, what we're also able to understand is that with the higher penetration as we go along of CNG fuel stations, and on the other hand, for electric mobility, the DISCOMs are getting ready in different cities and states, how they provide the power availability in time and the fast time to market on that front. I think these will be certain key enablers to drive the whole market here.
Sure, sir. Thanks a lot for your comments. I'll come back to the EV space. I think we're looking forward to a very healthy discussion on that one. Before we move our gears to that particular area, let me seek some comments from Mr. Amit Gupta as well. Sir, at GoGoBus, you must be looking at various data analytical tools to examine how the recovery is actually panning out post the second wave. And as Mr. Patwardhan said, interestingly, that post the second wave, actually, the recovery, especially for public transportation, has been relatively slow and gradual. So, what are your thoughts on the same?
Thank you, Shamsher, for the invitation, and good morning to everyone, the panelists over here. So, as you absolutely mentioned correctly, that what exactly the data says, I think that's where sometimes we have to go down, look into the data, how the analytics are working out. Because yes, definitely the first wave and the second wave, or rather I would say the first lockdown and the second lockdown has been instrumental in reshaping the entire industry, specifically the mobility industry. Like operators who have been running the show with the traditional system, now they are looking up to what all other alternative solutions where we can get some intelligence around the data, how we can actually understand how the demand flow is happening up, how we are able to understand whether the demand demographics, which is picking up from the different pockets. It's not a standard or uniform trajectory of demand coming from all the parts of India, But I think which is interestingly, which is coming out is some pockets are evolving, because we need to understand the bus mobility from a perspective of actually what is the need or what is the service of the need segment is solving for, whether it's solving for the basic needs of the people who have to travel for the business, for the job, or is solving for the needs of the people who are looking to travel for the leisure. So that where we look at across the length and breadth of the country, you realize the development and the demands are coming up in the pocket. And I think that is where the power, the tools which we are building up, the situation which we are trying to solve as the transportation as service, how exactly you are basically building up solutions around the demand and helping out both the operators at the same time the consumers who are actually looking for a mobility solution. And I think that is where the market, if you talk about, in some pocket there is a significant demand coming up, in some pocket the demand is very, very lackluster. And I think over the period of last 3 months or 4 months, what we are seeing is demands are coming up gradually in some of the area, like we're talking about eastern part of the country, northeastern part of the country, and in some pockets of, like, say, north and western part of the country. So that is where something the demands are coming up, as Mr. Pratwatan also mentioned. Yes, the IT companies are also looking at the demand trend. So I think that is where which we need to look at from a perspective of mobility, how the demand trends are shaping up for the next future, and how we are actually realigning the industries and thinking of from a perspective. Like if you look at the international examples like BMW and Daimler, how they are actually working up not from the OEM perspective, rather than thinking of a much larger perspective, how we are bringing the mobility as a service and taking it forward from there. OEM, the other stakeholders are coming together to create a solution as a whole, which is being offered to the consumers. I think that is where it's going to be the new trends which we need to look for going forward.
So let me come to Dr. Krishnamurthy now. So you represent KSRTC, which is one of the most prominent and largest, SRTUs in India. As Amit mentioned, that there are mixed trends in terms of the recovery in passenger travel through the bus segment. Could you shed some light as to how you are looking at things, especially when it comes to within the city bus transportation segment and within the state? How are you looking at the data, sir?
Yeah, good morning to my dear panelists and then Mr. Shamshi Devan. Thanks for an opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Please.
Yeah, good. See, considering I'm ex-chief engineer KSRTC now, considering the downfall of this operation of our AC buses and also the poor response of the public during last 1.5 years, we also tried different methodologies, different kinds of attempts that we made. Actually, in fact, for the time being, to help the society and all, we converted some old buses into this ICU units, and then the mobile clinics and all. They are in very small number. And then the second thing that we did is, as we have an extensive connectivity network across the state with our 22,000 plus buses, we have also concentrated more on the logistics, like the parcel, cargo and all. But the only thing is, I already, as we are there, the professional team, or we are professionals in only the public transport, there are a lot of big cargo companies and all who have got a better customer focus, and then they're very good in customer management. So we need to learn a lot, because of that. That is altogether a different kind of an industry which needs different professionalism. We have to, as an STO, I'm just referring to not only the KSRTC, we need to have a very good team of consultants who can just advise us in the logistics part, because as our load factor and all is have not even picked up to 50-55%. Already the private buses are effectively managing it, but we are still have got better scope because of as an STO I'm referring to. We have thousands of buses, and then we are now the e-commerce being shifted from the tier 1 cities to tier 2 cities. This transport sector has got a very good opportunity. If we use this, I think there is a good scope in the days to come. Maybe we can establish as an alternative to the different logistics, and also support the e-commerce businesses, like maybe I'm just mentioning it about my suggestions, like Amazon, Flipkart and all. Even we find even what I have seen with the integration and then also the e-commerce of payment, good effective payment gateways and all, now more than 50% of the business in e-commerce are happening in tier 2 and then tier 3 cities. So there is a good scope for utilizing these services, point number 2. And then the point number 3 is, as Mr. Prasanna Padwardhan and all those our good friends were mentioning, including STUs, this public transport has got a serious crunch. Even I keep talking to one of my friends of the bodybuilding and all, they also have not even 10% of the load. I mean to say that the workload or the input they used to do in the several years. So this is a clear indication that there is still a lot of expectation from our public transport. We are actually, even the villages and then the district level, we have almost picked up to 80% because the schools have opened and all. But this luxury services, what has happened is we are not able to operate even 25% of our AC buses. Even though you find that the flights are going full, might be where all the provision is there only for a small trip. I mean to say up to 300 kilometers intercity and all, they are still using the personal transport in spite of the high rise in the fuel prices. So that is really a case of concern for all the public transport, including the private luxury operators like maybe SRAs and then all big fleet owners of the country. But for this, we have to come out with some awareness plan, and then even we are taking care of each trip sanitization, and then so many other things we are trying to create. In spite of that, we are not able to do. Another thing is in Bangalore city alone, which is similar to Pune and then Delhi and all, this IT hub is there. In that IT hub, and then most of them still, as we have checked, more than 50% are still working from home. And then the two, those 50%, as we see, the roads are already choked up because of the personal transport. And then the companies like, I mean to say, like Chalo and then even Gogo Bus and then one of my friends of Shuttle, and then they can effectively use the shift from personal transport to public transport, I mean to say mass transport, by the IT tools. They have already done a very good job in personalized reservation concept, ticketless traveling, and then advanced booking and all. That's a very good mode of doing it. We also have to, as an STU, we should start thinking of the latest modes of using the IT in creating an awareness and also informing the passengers and all. These are all the things. And then the funding, I think the government has already taken good measures to support us in terms of EV bus and also the model on GCC bus. And then this can come in a big way to support us in funding pattern. And also, as we are not in a position to buy the buses, we can hire the buses on a GCC model and then provide a good transport to the public. And anyway, we are expecting good days to come in 6 months to go. So that will be a good thing to all of us in the public transport and also the tourism industry. I think that's our expectation. We have almost, I can say that it's about 85% for our regular tier 2 to tier 3 cities we have picked up. But this is intercity from interstate operations and all, still a lot to go. We have not even operating, we have the largest fleet of Volvo buses in the country, more than 600 plus intercity buses we have, premium services. We are operating still with 150 to 200 only.
Okay.
We hope that the days, our previous days of regime will come back to us soon. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Very, very interesting thought. So what you're saying is that, at the tier 2, tier 3 city level, we've seen pretty good recovery happening to almost 70 to 80% utilization or load factors coming back. But because of the risk awareness among people living in urban areas, there has been a shift from public transportation to private transportation, and that's why you're not seeing much recovery happening, at least in the luxury bus or coach segment right now.
Yeah.
Let me come to you, Sumit, now. At Greencell, you're looking at both B2G and B2C opportunities, and you're clearly building a plan to enter in a big manner in the B2C segment as well. Now, I'm sure you must be also scanning the market quite well right now as you set up your new venture. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, do you agree with the other panel members that recovery is at least a few quarters or maybe a year away as far as the luxury coach segment in India is concerned?
So, hi Hi, Shamsher. Thank you so much, and good morning, panelists. At Greencell, we have kind of tried to slice the market in a broad structure, right? Let me just kind of put some facts so that we kind of get the context, right? India is the second largest road network in the world, with in the last year of COVID, where things were not so bad, not so great in pandemic, still we make 14,000 kilometers of road in the last year itself, right? Our road network is one of the best, one of the largest, right? Maybe not the best, but one of the largest in the world, right? We have 50 plus cities with 10 lakh, more than 10 lakh passengers, and 350 cities with 1 lakh passengers, right? 1 lakh people, right? So clearly we have a huge opportunity. India market, if you see broadly, we are talking about a 10 crore kind of passengers which we have on a daily basis, right? If we dissect it into parts, then the road going passengers are around 7 crores, right? Which is 70% of the market. Out of the 7 crores, 93% are the bus commuting passengers, right? Which is around 6.5 crores, right? Now with the 6.5 crores, right? Clearly there has been some challenges in terms of the school and the corporates, right? Which are yet to kind of, come up as of now. Majority of the places are in stage where they are about to start the operation, right? My son who goes to school has, very excited to resume the school next month. And I'm sure that, this will kickstart in majority of the cities going forward, right? But the remaining part of it, which is the intercity travel or the intracity travel, there's a survey which was done by Harvard, right? They say 75% of that is non-discretionary in nature in India, right? So it's not an optional thing that I can today take a car, tomorrow I can take a bus. Bus is the only option. Right? So while I'm sure that there are pockets of green shoots which people are pointing out, but I'm very confident that this festive season, which is already on, we will hit the pre-pandemic level of occupancy, right? And it is just a matter of time that we will be surpassing this, as Mr. Prasanna has said, and Nishant also mentioned that there is a huge pent-up demand, right? Both in terms of leisure, both in terms of travel, both in terms of all the other segments, right? Now, if we divide the demands in the B2G and B2C segment, right? In the B2G segments, majority of the buses which are there in the government sector, they are over 7 to 10 years old, right? And there is a huge need of replacement of those vehicles, right? They are not BS6 compliant. They are huge in pollution, right? And second is there is a huge need from an efficiency and replacement perspective to come, right? So which will start the demand for new buses, right? Once the pandemic, government is doing quite a bit in terms of FAME 2, where they have kind of launched. BST has launched the world's largest electric bus tender of 1,900 buses. It has never happened in the whole world. Right? So clearly there are indications where the government is taking the lead and pushing the initiative. Similarly, in the B2C segment, also, while the existing operators are saddled with this 1.5 years and 2 years of non-operations and which has created a huge burden on them. But I think it is an opportunity for a lot of new entrants to enter and kind of occupy the space which has been vacated by some of the smaller and marginal players. And overall, I think there's a huge opportunity for everybody in the market. Right? So that's where I would like to put my analysis on the demand.
Sure. Thanks for sharing some data points, Sumit. I think clearly, I think the long-term demand for public transportation and the evolving trends are very critical for us to follow. And I think there are a lot of changes which are going to happen. So let me now connect the dot and bring Mohit into the picture now. Mohit, what has COVID-19 meant for customer behavior and adoption of digital technologies? How are you looking at things at Chalo?
Yeah, Shamsher, first of all, thank you for having me here. And it's just amazing to see Prasanna sir here and Mr. Ramurthy. good to have all of them here actually. I haven't really had a chance to talk to everyone else, but yeah, Sumit, good to see you as well. So, I'll come to digital in a minute, but let me just tell you how I really see the whole thing. We operate in some 35 cities, right? We would possibly have data around 4,000, 5,000 odd buses. And what we see, I think, is meaningful. I have huge respect for what Prasanna sir has said, right? And I think there are very few people in the industry who understand this industry better than him. But I would say that it took 9 months to recover after the first wave. 9 months, right? And I'm talking about more of stage carriage buses. Let's ignore this whole luxury segment for a minute, right? This is not where the India travels. India travels into those, for a daily commute. 70% of people traveling in stage carriage buses are traveling for their daily commute, right? So it took almost 9 months for the collection to come back to some 10-20% minus the pre-COVID level. Assuming the schools and colleges were still not open, so you can write off the 25% of ridership, but that's what it was. It took 4 months after the second wave to get the same level of occupancy. Now, 100 crore people are vaccinated. People are put on a mask and they're on the road. Which shop you go to where you don't find enough people, right? You tell me, which signal in your nearby vicinity you don't find the traffic now, right? Which part, right, is not open? I took my car. I was not traveling by train and flights. Sometime in November or December, all the way from Bombay to Mangalore and Bombay to Bhopal, I think every shop, every dhaba was open on the way, right? It was like as if India has come back to normal, which was a mistake. But my point is, the second wave recovery has been so much more faster, in general, at least in the cities that we operate in tier 2, tier 3. So that's number one. And I think it's just amazing, what has happened after COVID. First of all, I think buses will be the strongest beneficiary of this over a period of time. And they're already happening. Just think about it, right? Private vehicles they sold 30% lesser over 2019. Two-wheeler sales are down by 25%. Three-wheelers, it seems they just disappeared from the whole sales chart, right? So how are these people going to travel? Aren't these people going to travel in the buses, right? Where will they go if you buy lesser bikes and lesser cars? And one more thing, especially for the city travel, the people who are traveling in buses are not the kind of people who will go and buy a second-hand car, or a new two-wheeler, right? They will come back to buses. Cost of traveling in a bus is 2 rupees per kilometer. What is cheaper than that? A Rapido taxi, Bounce, a Vogo. I mean, what are we talking about? It has to be buses and nothing else. And again, that we don't have trains in this country, right? Except for a few places. So largely the daily commute is going to be in buses and it's recovering much, much faster. Coming back to, so that's one point actually. So, some of the changes are a little temporary. The work from home, not traveling for some avoiding discretionary travel, etc., etc. Maybe those are things which will come back. It will take a while, etc. A lot of people who are traveling in buses do not have work from home. They go back to their factories. They go back to open their shops, government offices, and so on and so forth, right? But few things which are just permanent, actually, And I think look at the digital part of it, and that's what you really asked me. The whole adoption of digital has been so fantastic. There are markets where we have launched a Chalo card or a Chalo app for people to travel in. And the adoption was something like 30-35% before COVID, including students. And students are the earliest adopter. For, you launch a card, you launch a digital payment, they just adopted. Indore was a great example. Some 35 or 40% digital penetration, 90% of those users were students, right? After COVID, I'm back to 30% in Udupi, 45% in Jabalpur, 20% in Indore without students. So a lot more people have adopted saying, I will travel digitally, including, for example, Chalo can now tell you not only where your bus is, but how crowded the bus is. And this is like super useful if you really care for, not to get into a very crowded bus. So one thing which I see is that the adoption of digital is fantastic. And that will even further boost the bus industry for many reasons. For example, more you have digitization, lesser is the pilferage. I was talking to some operator in Mangalore, and they told me that the collection is lower compared to pre-COVID, etc. And we did some data crunching with them. In one of the buses, we did some little more monitoring. Collection was 400 rupees higher than the pre-COVID. The conductor has just more pilferage because they have been out of the jobs as well for so many quarters, right? They will just come back and earn more money. So the point is that, it's not exactly how it seems to be. But more you do digital, more you digitize the cash in the bus, better is your data, better is the demand and supply, right? Chalo captures some 200 million data points every day. We are able to really say where the bus stop should be, how the bus should really be running, and so on and so forth, right? All those things will come up. And therefore, we will be able to run this whole bus network. We'll be able to run everything so much better. What I do really, expect that is, and Prasanna sir can say that, the government should have done a lot more for the sector, a lot more, right? From a taxes to, the way the route permits are given, the way, and so many things which are not really right around it, and revive it completely. It's a great opportunity to literally move this country from a private transportation, which is already, going down, to buses. I mean, I'll take a pause. I think I went on and on, but let me take a pause here.
Thanks a lot. I mean, it's very interesting to know that 30 to 35% digital adoption in the bus segment. We'll come to that, and I'll be very interested to know that how do you dissect that data, especially between urban centers versus the rest of the country. So let me shift gears to the electric vehicle segment and the usage of alternate fuels when it comes to public transportation. Now, if you look at government's focus, clearly there is a lot of initiatives being put in place by the government. While on the demand side, they have extended the FAME2 policy by a couple of years. On the supply side as well, the government has come out with a PLI scheme very recently, and they had come out with an 18,000 crore policy to develop and manufacture advanced chemistry cells in India. So government is doing its bit, to create an overall EV ecosystem in the country. Now at ICRA, we believe that, roughly about 8 to 10% of total buses in India will move to electric in the next few years or so. And clearly we are seeing a lot of traction. Would like to understand from you, Mr. Arya, how do you see the opportunity in the electric bus segment in India over the next few years?
Sure. So see, in my view, as we all know today, almost 50% of the buses, if talking about a normal year, which you said 85, 90,000 buses were used for intracity travel, and almost 50% is for intercity, what were there, if I broadly take the numbers. And in the intracity travel, already we see that with the subsidy today, we are having a right TCO in place. And as we go along, we would be hitting parity, in my view, by 2025 or 2026, for sure, in the intracity segment. And intercity may be just a year down the line from there. And that will be the real tipping point. And clearly, in my perspective, I see that the intracity market should be able to convert to close to about 40 to 50% by 2026, and maybe about 15 to 20% on the intercity market to electric buses. Because people would really understand and see that how such kind of benefits are coming across with the battery density going up, and the charging protocols improving, the kind of charging rate going up, and the battery size is not increasing as much. So the kind of energy you can carry with the same amount of battery packs is substantially higher. And I see that also the STUs and other customers are getting educated about electric. It is not something which is Greek and Latin for them, as they understand. That is what we used to see in FAME1, when it used to be more difficult to really convince customers and put them across to the kind of operating patterns, because we are one of the companies who are there in FAME1 also, and now in FAME2 as well. And we see many other new players coming to the market in FAME2. So for them, they are having first-hand experiences and learning things when there is a lot of consolidation also happening, which is good for the sector, new players coming in, creating a level playing field and bringing in more perspectives. But definitely that experience is very important to really understand where the vehicles have clocked few million kilometers in the last couple of years, 2.5 years, which gives real-time data on the ground. Otherwise, we are all really benchmarking with global numbers, domestic numbers, what could actually happen. And devil lies in the details here, because when we look at energy efficiency of the vehicles, when we look at the power infrastructure, when we look at the kind of the battery performance, the whole vehicle integration, so definitely we see the number of moving parts reduced quite substantially. But in certain cases where we see that people do not really end up using the technologies available in our country on the software side and hardware side, and we really see that the localization levels are not, because in some scenarios there is still a methodology that, like solar panels, we can import the whole vehicle into India and just put the nuts and screws on and the vehicle gets going. Whereas it is not the same case in case of electric vehicles, and people would understand that in next few years wherever they feel so, because there's a different perspective altogether. In electric vehicle, the intricacy is much higher, how the vehicle would perform, what would actually happen, and the vehicles are designed for the Indian market, which is very unique market, and every city has its own dynamics. So I think those are very critical factors where you get real-time ground data, and a lot of collaboration is required in terms of the operating pattern, the demographic and geographic requirements of a city, how we are seeing that the charging, recharging cycles are there, how we are ensuring that we are not actually carrying batteries onto vehicles rather than people, which is the prime focus of any bus. So I think all those key fundamentals, the market is slowly maturing, getting to understand how things should be done in a particular manner. And basis that, the industry is going to expand multifold, and now multiple OEMs like us are really seeing that how we are able to have a strong footprint. And as I think one of our co-panelists shared, so digital transformation will be playing a very key role onto this, where the real-time data is being available from the buses, how they're performing, what is actually happening, where a lot more optimization will be done in the years to come. On the other hand, what I personally feel, that companies which will be going for an EV ecosystem approach will be the ones which will redefine the market, rather than purely looking at it as an electric bus play. Because the kind of optimization, the kind of real-time check which can be done with your battery solutions, the second life of battery, energy storage, where we see that the first life, depending on chemistry to chemistry, can last for 3 to 7 years. In the case of second life, you have 8 to 10 years, whether that is being factored in your business model or not, whether the batteries are being designed for that or not. So I think all those things become very crucial. Do your vehicles carry the weight of the batteries, where you have to run the whole day and charge overnight? In that case, how do you end up compromising on the number of passengers in the bus? Then that impacts the revenue of the customer. So I think all these key fundamentals are very crucial to understand. And at the same time, what is the charging infrastructure availability, whether on highways or in cities? Does the end customer have range anxiety in this case or not? What kind of requirements do they fulfill? I think all these are key questions which need to be addressed simultaneously. But one thing which is most important here is that how funding is being available, how this sector is being taken up as priority sector for funding, whether on the debt side or from different financial institutions. New instruments are coming up, like what we see. CESL has done a fantastic job in this case, coming out with different grand challenges. They are trying to position themselves as the Solar Energy Corporation of India of the e-mobility sector, where we have achieved tremendous scale, going up to 100 gigawatt in the last 5 to 6 years, where we were at the bottom of the pyramid compared to many global countries. And today we are amongst the top 5 in terms of the solar adoption. So I think that is where we are today. And I think the next 3 to 4 years will be very interesting, really, to understand how industry can work and how we are actually creating the products which are made for Indian market, and not cut, copy, paste kind of a perspective, where we clearly understand what are the needs of the market. And that is why this industry will have a lot of consolidation and a lot of collaboration, because no one company can do everything. And there's a lot of pools of knowledge which are available, where a lot of work can be done together. So that's my view about this. And clearly, this is what would give it the scale and size which I was referring to.
Sure. So clearly, as you rightly said, the TCO now works in favor of electric buses, especially when we incorporate the subsidy element. But at the same time, there are many other moving parts of the overall entire EV ecosystem, which have to come together to make all of this happen. Now, Mr. Prasanna, I would like to come to you now, sir. As one of the prominent fleet operators in the public transportation space, clearly this is something which must be playing on your mind, in terms of adopting electric buses in your fleet. Now, if you look at the current scheme of things, the FAME 2 policy is restricted to, gross contract models right now, and it's not really available for other segments at present. How are you looking at the overall strategy for your company when it comes to adopting electric buses, or the time has still not come?
I believe that electric is the future before hydrogen future starts, of course. But in recent times, electric will be the future. And while having said that, when we talk about general buses, we need to understand what are the numbers and what is the requirement. See, out of 19 lakh buses, about 6 lakh buses are used for schools, for which electrification, unless that cost comes down drastically, it would be very, very difficult. And same is the case with staff transportation, because their per day kilometer running is so low that your capex cost will kill their total costing. So unless we find out solution which is cheaper and with low cost battery, low capacity battery also, of course, those vehicles will not get electrified. That is one. Second is, then there are intercity operations, which are about STUs amount to about 1.5 lakh, out of which about 40,000 would be running in cities. So for them, electrification of buses is the way forward. But intercity coaches or intercity buses, which are particularly running on long distance, it all depends on how battery capacity comes up, what kind of chemistry we are using, what kind of charging infrastructure which we are using. So intercity partially will get electrified, and balance would come onto either ethanol or LNG or CNG or whatever, some other mode of other fuel option. And rural area, about 3.5 lakh vehicles run into rural areas overall. Private I'm talking about, apart from STUs. So all those are smaller vehicles, mid-size vehicles. So there again, the cost of battery or cost of overall vehicle, charging infrastructure, availability of spare parts, availability of servicing would play a bigger role. So overall, I think electrification of intra-city buses would be much, much faster compared to other segments. And other side is, while we are talking about how much percentage of electric buses would come, we also need to understand how much capacity to maintain those buses or to run those buses is available in the country. And same is the case with manufacturing. How many electric buses we can manufacture in next 10 years? What would be the capacity? And how that transition would happen? Because we are talking about 19 lakh buses, till that time probably will require 25, 30 lakh buses. So that quantum of manufacturing, that quantum of manpower training, and that quantum of infrastructure, unless that gets developed, and unless we find solutions for schools and employee transport and long distance, electric buses will remain limited in number in those sectors. But as far as city transportation is concerned, I think till 2030, most of the cities will go electric, and government could not have done better by what they are doing now. So your diesel price is 102 rupees. So your economics is totally in favor of electric. So whatever may the cost, if your kilometer running is higher, your electric bus is going to be beneficial. But problem is where kilometers are lower, and problem is where range of battery would be a challenge. So if we overcome these two challenges, then it would be much faster.
Sure, sir. Completely echo your thoughts. I think the early adoption is going to happen within the city segment and by SRTUs through the GCC route. Now, let me come to you, Sumit, and put some data points on the table. You know, when FAME 2 policy came, there was a clear focus on the bus segment and the commercial transportation segment. And a sizable amount of allocation was towards that. Nearly 7,000 buses were to be tendered out. But what we have seen in over the last 2.5 years of FAME 2 policy is that by August, only about 3,000 buses were actually tendered out. And today, maybe about 1,200 buses are actually, running on, electric buses are actually running on Indian streets. So what do you think have been, the challenges in really accelerating the EV adoption, especially when, there was such a big, incentive available, and what can be done from the government side to really accelerate the adoption going forward?
So I feel that out of the 3,000 odd buses which were kind of bid out.
Yeah, Sumit, you're coming in and out. You know, you got to be closer to the mic, or you have to do something about the microphone. At least that's for me. I don't know if everybody can hear him well.
We also are unable to hear him.
Yeah. So Sumit, it's like in and out. And what you say is very important. I wanted to make sure that everyone gets it. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's much better now, Sumit.
Okay. So essentially what we saw in the FAME 2 adoption and FAME 1 adoption is that while there was a lot of pipeline which got created, but because of various pandemic-related reasons, the implementation took a little time, right? For example, the UP project, which has got as a state which has got the largest number of buses allocated, almost 700 buses, right?
Sumit, you're in and out. So you are there, but just see if you can speak directly on the microphone.
Yeah. Is it better now?
So much better. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I was talking about the UP project, which is around 700 buses, largest state, so to say, intracity buses which got implemented, right? Out of which the pipeline is now very visible that, after their launch on 5th October by Honorable Prime Minister, now we see that, the adoption is going to really kickstart there, and implementation on the ground, we are expecting in the next 3 to 6 months, all these buses will be on the ground, right? So I feel that a lot of inventory which was in the FAME 1 and FAME 2 will now get implemented in the next 3 to 6 months is what my best guess is, right? And what we've seen now, and as Nishant was suggesting that, CSL is kind of really accelerating the push towards the adoption, we see, there is a 1900 bus tender from DST, there is a 340 bus tender from DIMS. So all the large cities are coming up with various large tenders, right? And we are expecting this number to be almost 8,000 odd buses in the next 6 to 12 months, right? So clearly there is a huge push and to kind of, completely use this allocated subsidy. And now I think OEMs are in a far better place where they were 1 year back in terms of the supply chain, in terms of their product stabilization, right? Homologations, in terms of crystallization of, or fine tuning their products. So they are very much there. Right? Now, second thing in terms of making it, reaching it at a tipping point, I feel that intercity buses, right? Electric buses do not require any subsidy. And I think that's very fundamental to any industry growth. Any industry which has grown has only grown if it is not dependent on a government subsidy. Right? It has to have merit of doing business on its own, right? And I think electric coaches, intercity coaches have reached that place with the current cost of ownership. It is tilted towards the side of electric buses. So that is something which is already there. It's a huge market. We have almost like 40-50,000 luxury intercity buses, right, which can really get transformed into electric. Right? Similarly, when it comes to the intracity, right, where the per day running is around 200 kilometers, right, that is where I feel that it requires a little more time. Until that time, government has to hold hands to kind of provide the subsidy. And this is very similar to what China did, right? China has got 99% of electric vehicles in the world, right? What they did was they identified the top 10 centers of electric penetration and ensured that, whatever was supposed to be given in terms of subsidy, both in terms of operating as well as the manufacturing subsidies were provided to those centers. So not just manufacturing capabilities was created, but was also the maintenance and other ecosystem got created to ensure that mass adoption happened in those 10 centers. And then gradually they proliferated to almost 350 odd centers in China. Right? This has been the trajectory for China, and I think they have been leading the adoption of electric buses in the world. And I think we can learn a thing or two from them in terms of how do we go about it. I think once the rationalization of the prices happen in the OEM segment in terms of the buses, right? Because more and more OEMs are now entering the space, right? And it will rationalize the price, bring down the cost of components, and that will ensure that the subsidy gap is gradually reduced to a level where we don't need the subsidy anymore. And that will be, I believe, is the tipping point where we have, as of now in India, we have around 20 lakh buses, right? And we are short by another 10 to 11 lakh buses. Right? So there's a huge opportunity. Opportunity in India is never a challenge, right? It's just about the right pricing. India is extremely price sensitive market. Right? So the moment we get it priced right, I think we are hitting the tipping point.
Sure. Let me come to you, Dr. Krishnamurthy, now. Sir, government is really pushing private sector participation in electric bus deployment in India through the SRTU route. Do you think it's a win-win kind of a situation for SRTUs? You don't have to really deploy large sums of money upfront. You don't have to even be concerned about the technology and the changes therein. How are you looking at EV adoption? And a second question would be to you would be, sir, that what are the bottlenecks that you see in swift implementation of these projects? Depot availability and other kind of infrastructure challenges, do you see those are major pain points?
Yeah. Yeah, ask me the right question. Now, there are two things here. One thing is the professional management level at which all these years the STUs are being trained and then they have been operating. If you compare down the line, then Maharashtra, MSRTC, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and then Karnataka, Andhra, and all, they are on large scale, they are operating by the government undertakings. So they are definitely professionals and then they are well established, sustainable. One, actually, when I just participated in Niti Aayog also, I just suggested that those organizations which are capable of handling themselves the operations, so they also must be extended under the FAME to some subsidy. Because see, as a manufacturer also, I think Mr. Nishant Arya and then also others agree that there is a risk involved. And I mean to say that there will be an investor's part is required, interest is required, and then we are also giving bank minimum guarantee kilometers is also there from STU side, and also lot of SLAs, penalties for so many things. All these will come with a cost. So there is an operating margin, whoever it is, even as an operator, they have to find a very big investor to operate, because no operator can invest at least 1.5 to 2 crores for an electric bus. Even though government must be giving the subsidy of 40-45 lakhs, nobody knows after 10 years, this is for a long period of about 10 to 12 years. Huge risk is involved. Now with the corona also, even STUs, we don't know now STUs only have either municipal corporations or STUs only have to hire these electric buses. Now, so there is very high risk involved for the operator side also. They don't know. Even the investors will put a huge percentage of interest on this. So all these things will at least, I think 20% is the margin in this. If STUs or any government body are undertaking who are capable of handling things, they can straight away even extend the subsidy so that even the cost will come down and then our implementation plans will take place early. That's what my rather suggestion I can say. And then with my experience, I was able to say a lot of companies may not be agreeable to or prepared to take the ownership. I mean to say ownership basis the electric buses, but it is not a rocket science. As Ms. Amit I was telling also, and then other manufacturers, there is nothing great about it. We have maintained the best of its kind of the most technological innovation, like from Volvo and all, we were operating. Compared to the maintenance of all those buses, I think electric buses may not be, CNG buses we maintain. So there is no such a technological challenge. We can take care about 2-3 years, and then the AMC, if it is under the contract with the manufacturer, I think we do that. That will bring down the cost to a greater extent. That's one opportunity. Second point is that's under the GCC model also, the government is promoting this. There's a good opportunity for the private operators also to come with the model. But only thing is, this being the cost which is on a very high side, till such time the subsidy is extended, the private operators also will be able to invest and come out with a plan. Once the subsidy, government also cannot extend this subsidy for a longer time, then suddenly there will be a shortage. I mean to say that stoppage of this project, how the NERM has ended up, and then now there is a gap of 3 years, 4 years. That should not happen like that. Maybe over a period of time, if the electrical buses are offered at a lower price without the subsidy, what we are getting about 40-45 lakhs. If the cost comes down to that extent with the maturity of the technology, I think the private operators also will take over. And there will be a, as far as the passengers are concerned, you take them in a electric bus or a Volvo bus or a fossil fuel bus or CNG bus, for them, travel cost per kilometer is the most priority in our country. So pollution and all, it's only the headache of the government, pollution-free environment or the government body. So for a public is concerned, we must give the best luxurious or at least the best quality for what they pay the per kilometer basis. That way, I think we have to find a way. The government also has to support. But all these days, the priority used to be not on the top priority, this public transport. And we have so much of funding happening to different areas. I think over a period of time, if the either the state government or the central government come out with a plan to support this public transport, either through a private operator or through a STU or public transport or municipality or whatever it is, I think the days will change. Even we have seen in KSRTC, we have under the NERM scheme, we have extended even tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities in the city public transport. It has made a big change in the city public life of city. I mean to say that the travelers who are traveling in auto with 8 passengers, 10 passengers.
So I think you've got muted.
Yeah, so that will help them to have a big shift in the economy. That's what I suggest. So that's my feels. Thanks for my giving the opportunity. This.
Mr. Arya, if I could come to you now, if you're around. So both Sumit and Dr. Krishnamurthy alluded to one element, which is that, what happens when the subsidies actually dry up? You as an OEM, as well as an operator of buses in India, both electric and others, are you seeing a clear trend that, the changes in technology, the battery cost packs, are they really coming down to make electric buses, self-reliant without subsidy in the next few years or so?
Yeah, that's what I shared earlier, Shamsher, that by FY26, we will hit parity. And as you see, the FAME subsidies are there until FY24, which is more from an allocation perspective. But always the buses take about a year after the tenders and things are done. So which will be disbursed until FY25. And from FY26, I see that we will be hitting parity anyway, because it's an inverse relationship where the EV prices will be going down and the CNG and diesel will be going up as well. So one is on the operating level. Second, when we have the CAFE norms for the CNG and diesel, the prices will further go up. And with multiple other safety regulations, prices will further keep going up. So I think we will hit the parity level in FY26. So that would not be a concern. And now with multiple state policies also promoting electric buses and other things like what we see in Maharashtra, we see in Delhi, we see in Gujarat, we see in Karnataka, I think there is a lot of momentum in this space. And few of my fellow colleagues were talking about the capacity. So capacity is actually, there's enough capacity now which is getting built up in the country for electric buses. I see that in the next year itself, there'll be a capacity of about 15 to 20,000 buses which can be manufactured. The point is that what is the kind of offtake and scale, and the scale will also be driving down the costs in case of the electric vehicles, in addition to the technology driving value. And that's where we look at the total cost of ownership, where we clearly understand that we are not, the companies and operations would not be looking at cheap vehicles, but competitive vehicles in this space, as they have to perform for 10 to 12 years, depending from city to city. So that is going to be critical. And I think safety, affordability, and comfort would become 3 key elements of this particular space and would redefine the market from that perspective. That's my view in this scenario. And simultaneously, you would also see that the charging infra and as well as the power electronics would also play a very important role in this case. The way we are looking at semiconductor manufacturing and power electronics getting localized in India, where largest part would be produced in our country as we go along, I think that would bring down the prices, and simultaneously the utilization of such suppliers will not be dependent only on electric buses, but many other applications in the non-electric area and other forms of electric vehicle segment as well. So the dependence not being only on one segment gives it that opportunity to scale up and not take that burden of investment, because the investments are very high in the power electronic and semiconductor space.
Sure. Let me just invite Amit now. Amit, would you like to share your thoughts? And particularly, I'm interested to know, from a financing standpoint, whenever we talk to financiers, their key concern for electric vehicles is, the performance of those vehicles, right? So I just want to understand from you that, how role of technology at GoGo Bus is really helping address some of the concerns that the financiers may have in funding EVs.
Definitely. I think Samsay, you raised a very valid point, and this is the point which I want to talk to. I think sometimes what happens is we need to understand whenever we are talking about the EV as a sector, we need to understand what exactly this industry represents. Are we talking about a typical automobile industry, or we are intending to move into heavy engineering industry? So I think there's a lot of international comparisons available how the heavy engineering industry is performing globally. If you look at airlines, if you look at shipping, so being from shipping background, understand how exactly the asset which is of that super high cost, how the ownership is being converted from a capex model to the opex model, how the OEM who is manufacturing those assets is converting that asset and making it from an opex. So let's say instead of having that offshoot of that asset, is once the asset is moving out of my factory, like this the entire thing is coming out of my books. So we have to move out of that entire hypothesis. Maybe a paradigm shift has to come up from the OEM side also. Can we think of a consideration that this is a heavy engineering asset? Can we talk about leasing it out to a reliable operator with a credit-worthy operator and running it for say 10 years, where the OEM coming up as a performance guarantee of the asset, where the financer would also be happy to say, okay, the OEMs are coming up and taking up the guarantee of the asset which is there, because there's a lot of the uncertainty. Everybody has talked about the uncertainty about the product, the uncertainty around the battery, the life, the performance. You never know what will happen in a 10 years time. Being an OEM coming over there and playing an important role in redefining this entire industry, have a significantly role or important collaborative role to play. We have to think from a capex to the opex model first. Secondly, on the technology side, on the demand side, definitely it's always makes sense with the fuel price going up to the almost 102 rupees or 103 rupees across industry, that differential of the operating on the fuel cost. Fuel cost typically costs around 25 to 30%, but with the fuel price increasing up to almost 100 rupees, this fuel component of operations or daily operations has gone up to almost 40%. With this 10% delta has actually impacted the significant earning of the operator. Today, the operators are thinking of continuing and looking forward to an asset which is an EV. Yes, definitely the cost is reducing, but if we're talking about reducing it from the capex to the opex model, he can also think about it. With the asset under the what you call control of the OEM for next say 5 years or 10 years or maybe 7 years time. So we have to talk about longer duration of the financing of the asset. There are lots and lots of operators. They are approaching us. If we try it out something in the EV, is it possible to arrange something of that sort? Because they understand the demands are picking up, the numbers are picking up, but they can definitely have a significant amount of cost advantage if they can reduce the upfront capital cost, and the cost of the capital will help them manage the show. And that is where we are also looking forward, like how the OEMs also thinks about moving in that direction. If we go in that, build a joint collaborative model, because what is happening up, even the private charging infra guy, they are ready to take the bet on the sector, because the charging infra for the buses is slightly different from the charging infra which is available for the cars or the two-wheelers. We need to understand the entire ecosystem. The charging infra guy, we as a technology player, we're talking about the technology as service player, then the operators who are ready to put in the investment, and the OEM. How the four stakeholders come together, build a collaborative ecosystem to talk about, okay, this is something which you can really put in on the ground. With subsidy, without subsidy, subsidy is something secondary. As mentioned by Sumit, also subsidy is going to be not where industry start adapting, because we have been pushing for the electric vehicles for so many years now. Apart from the two-wheeler and three-wheeler market, we don't have significant adoption in the heavy engineering industry. So we have to do something differently, which internationally there's a lot of the models which is the airlines are doing it, shipping are doing it. Why can't we do something similar in the bus space also in India? And India could be one of the leader in that. How the government, without the government support, we can build a collaborative ecosystem to talk about this entire upliftment of this entire industry. We being a bus country, I think this is a high time we should be thinking about how we join forces and work out something, a solution in the common goods of the country. That's what I would like to add up from that.
Thanks, Amit. Very useful points. So let me hand it over to Rohit now. Rohit, would you like to take up questions from the Q&A chat box for us?
We will use the last 5-10 minutes for a quick Q&A section. I have noticed that Mr. Patwardhan and Mr. Arya have been kind enough to answer a lot of them. So thank you so much. I will go with few of the ones you have already answered, because I want everybody to know what you have said instead of just the person who's asked this question. So there are a few themes which I've repeated. One is obviously electrification of buses. So Dahar, Mujawar and Jayant Upasni have asked that, how much time will it take to replace all petrol and diesel buses with EVs? So you have mentioned that, Mr. Prasanna Patwardhan, that 100% replacement might not happen. However, till 2030, you expect at least 50% newly manufactured vehicles to be EV, along with LNG, CNG, diesel, and you also expect to see start of hydrogen cell vehicles growing over electric in some segments. Nishant Arya has mentioned to this that he expects over 60%, when it comes to EV by 2030. Now, moving to the next question, another key question that people are asking is what will happen when we see a lot of metro in cities. So how is that going to impact the bus growth? So Mr. Nishant Arya has mentioned that both modes of transportation will complement each other rather than competition. Would any of the other panelists would like to comment on the impact of metro and how it will impact the bus growth in the near future?
I think if we take example of even London, wherein it has world's best underground, which is metro, still buses carry more number of people, because buses provide last mile connectivity. However good or strong metro network you may have, you still will require buses to connect people to near to their home, kind of a thing. Even if you take case of Singapore also, there also buses plays a good role in spite of having good metro network. Same is the case with Delhi. Even with Delhi 350 odd kilometers, even buses as of today also carry more number of people than what metro carries. So it's a no brainer, wherein even if you have good network of metro, what our government wants to have, your buses will remain the major carriers of the people. So it is equally important or more important to strengthen bus segment along with metro. So bus segment is here to stay and here to grow.
Okay, great. So the next question, it was directed at Mr. Arya. Rajendra Hushe has asked, how many EV buses will be manufactured in the next year, which is 2020, this year 2021 and year 2022 in India? To which Mr. Arya has replied that electric bus market in 2023 will be more than 7,000 buses for multiple applications. Would any of you would like to add to that number? Like, I mean, would they like to venture a guess around that estimate?
I think the numbers are quite achievable, and there is a lot of opportunity to kind of overachieve on these numbers, which Nishant has suggested. Right? Because there are a lot of options, and the manufacturers are kind of coming up.
Sumit, your voice is like government schemes coming and going.
What a relation.
Okay. I think it's the network. I'm sorry about it. Okay. So I'm just saying that there's a huge opportunity to overachieve those numbers, and I am more bullish on a higher number, closer to 10,000 buses. Is what my
Sure.
I'd
Abhishek,
like to ask one question.
Yeah.
How many buses do we think we'll be able to manufacture in electric bus segment in 2030? What capacity will build to reach up to 50% of the production of total fleet by 2030? We have 19 lakh buses. And around every year, we sell somewhere around 70 to 80,000 buses, or in some years, even up to 90,000 buses. So even up to reach up to say 50% of that capacity of newly produced buses, we will have to reach up to 40-50,000 buses per annum. So when is that year when manufacturers will be well equipped to reach up to that number?
In next 5 years. So Prasanna, as you are saying, so the capacity of being able to produce 40 to 50,000 buses can be installed and put in place in next 5 years itself. And what you were saying, by 2030, the demand, in our opinion, for buses would not be 90,000. It would go up to about 140, 150,000 buses. Yeah. And out of that, as I mentioned, that's why I mentioned that close to 90,000 to 100,000 buses will be electric, which will be produced in India. So that's the capacity of 90,000 to 100,000 buses we would have by 2030.
So we would also retrofit, right, some of these diesel CNG buses with electric infra, at least for that time period, right, until we can really upgrade every bus. Any bus which is 4-year-old with the EMI almost done would make so much more sense to just have a retrofit, make it electric.
The retrofitment of the buses is very complicated. Probably, I think it's like totally repairing a old house and then building a first floor on that.
Possible.
No, it's because the chassis value, when you compare with the conversion, so the total chassis value itself will be not more than 5 lakhs. Nobody would like to add so much of investment. But one thing is, maybe next 2-3 years to come, not only the bodybuilding manufacturers or automobile manufacturers, I think even those who are concerned with one who can manufacture a battery can also become an electric bus manufacturer. One who can build one who is manufacturing electric motor also can become a electric bus manufacturer. Anyone can become a bus manufacturer once the technology matures. I think another 2 years to 3 years to go. I feel that there will be more than 15-20 electrical bus manufacturers in the country, in the industry. I think so. In that way, what Mr. Nishant Arya has mentioned, or Prasanna Patwardhan was mentioning about the requirement, I think it will be fulfilled.
I would like to add
just to add to what Dr. Krishnamurthy was saying is that I second that point, that retrofitment of existing buses with electric buses is only possible because the complete EV architecture is different. And the kind of weight which you have in electric buses is entirely different. The structure doesn't support that. So the life of the bus would get compromised multifold, and the person who would invest into it would not get any returns. So that is the reason why
feasibility. We have also tried it out. I think over a period of time it can happen, but the value addition to the retrofitment on a old chassis, I think it's disproportionate. So it's better to go for a new technology.
Absolutely.
So you're right about all of these things. I was trying to say that, these are all complex problems to solve. And this is what technology does every passing year. A lot of things which we thought were impossible are possible today, right? So my point is, India needs, as Prasanna sir said, we don't have to just electrify 19 lakh buses. Mr. Gadkari, Honorable Minister, had said that India requires 3 million more buses, right? So what about those? And how are we going to get there? If you're talking about, India's population having 3 buses for 10,000 people versus we need 30 buses, we're talking about 10x more, buses to be on the road. How do you do all of that, right? Not just by producing, but possibly solving more complex problem and making it, available. And again, as everybody, you all have said it already, the bus price point has to maybe come down below 50 lakh for a majority of the buses in this country to become viable, right? As Sir said, school buses, corporate employee transportation buses, and so many other buses, right? Intercity buses, 40,000 intercity buses we can electrify with subsidies. But what about another 4 lakh buses which are running intracity? Who is going to replace a 1 crore bus with a 25 lakh rupee diesel and CNG bus, right? So I think all those things has to be solved, and therefore it might be not a great idea to do a retrofit, but if it makes the bus, the TCO, operate better, maybe we should look at that.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'll just add up over here. I think what Mohit mentioned and what Dr. Ramamurthy also mentioned there. I think that's what the beauty of what exactly the young and agile startup. I know there are a couple of startups in South India. They are trying to do a retrofitting of the old buses. One is that. Secondly, as you mentioned, that more than the OEMs in the market, there are many bodybuilders who are already there across India. There are more than 200. If I talk about an offline data, there are more than 200 plus bodybuilders across India. And those bodybuilders have the capacity to base the bulk body. So what is happening up? Maybe we need to think about how we can democratize the production of these buses by all those vehicles. The basically centralized norms can be taken care of by the OEM, and how you can democratize the assembly of the bus. Like right now, what is happening up? The OEMs are providing the chassis, and these bodybuilders are manufacturing the complete buses. Why can't we take them as a partner or extended partner and democratize the access of the mobility? Maybe that is where something we need to think about. We need to think about something differently, even with not only exact retrofitting, but maybe we can change up the chassis, whatever we can retrieve, and bring out the cost of the ownership of a new bus to a slightly lower, maybe a 30% reduction by that could also be a significant impact with a larger adoption. So that's why we need to think of a different model, different options, how we can get the democratization of the ownership of the bus. And absolutely more, I agree with the Mohit point that we have to think about getting the buses cost to less than 50 to 60 lakh. That's what an average Indian operator can afford. We can't afford a bus which is almost like 1 crore plus right now.
Sure. Thank
As
you.
of today, actually, body and chassis, both put together cost is less than 20% for the EV. 80% of the cost is actually total driveline and battery and everything else.
Yeah.
So by saving 20% cost, by taking second-hand vehicle, how much we are going to save today is a bigger challenge. So unless that battery cost and driveline cost comes down, this is going to be very difficult. But as Mohit rightly said, we are country of innovators. So we'll have to find out some way to solve this riddle, because we have large number of buses which either we'll have to scrap all of them. So rather than scrapping, can we find out some solution is the challenge.
I think a lot of these international manufacturers are just watching us on the sidelines, and they're just waiting for the critical mass of the demand to kind of come in, and they will like to jump in at that point of time so that it makes commercial sense for them. So I think I'm very confident that, in the next 12 to 18 months, we will have more options getting created, and it will not just create competition for the existing OEMs, but it will also provide the ecosystem in terms of talent pool, in terms of supply of parts, in terms of the entire ecosystem which is required to kind of catapult the growth of EV manufacturing and subsequently adoption in the country. So we are in touch with a lot of these large OEMs who are just interested in entering India and just waiting for the critical mass to come in. So I think manufacturing should catch up, and government is doing their bit by announcing the PLIs, and which will kind of definitely trigger this growth.
Okay, great. So very lively discussion and even a more livelier Q&A. So I think the audience, most of your questions have been answered. I couldn't, speak about them in the Q&A section because we're running out of time and we are cognizant of the next few sessions. So I will share those answers with you personally over email. Shamsher, if you want to do a quick sum up, and then we can, move on to the next session.
Sure. So thanks a lot, everyone, for taking out time from your busy schedule. I think it was a very insightful and interesting discussions, around both how things have panned out post-COVID, as well as what are the opportunities as well as challenges that we see in adopting electric buses. Clearly, I think we are on our way, but the entire ecosystem has to come together over the next few years. So very interesting times going ahead for everyone, and wish you all the best and hope for great EV journey ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Okay, thanks.